That helps whoever it needs to help. Okay, it's recorded now. um, sorry. Um, anyway, working in a newsroom. If they missed the presentation up to this point, they weren't here live. They should have been here live. Okay. Um, so question everything and everybody. In a lot of journalism programs that I witnessed, they get you to question everything. Like that is something that they tell you. Question everything, always be curious, always be inquisitive, always keep your eye open. But what they don't do is go the next step and encourage you to actually question everybody, right? Including your boss, including the people who are your editors, including the police, including the government, certain city officials. Oftentimes as journalists, we have these people who we see as official folks, and we take what they say a lot of times as fact, not realizing how sometimes that makes us as journalists is basically like the PR people, right, for certain entities and certain institutions, but also how those entities and institutions and their place in society automatically will ensure that your coverage isn't responsive and reflective of the communities that it should be, right? So one of the things that I like to use as an example are police reports. Particularly as it relates to, somebody being shot, somebody being killed, or whatever the case may be. More often than not, a lot of journalists will take whatever the police says as fact. And so that leads to, for example, rampant misgendering of trans people, for example, in their deaths, because cops are trash and they, often have very minute ways of thinking about gender and identity and bodies, right? And so a police report will say that this, man was killed doing or during this particular situation. And then we will take that as fact, as press, and we will write up a story that says this person was killed. And then 2 days later, we'll realize, actually, the person was a trans woman, right, who didn't even go by the name that the police used, right? And then it creates this record of misinformation just because we didn't ask a second question of, the police report, or because we didn't do our own research to find community members, family, etc., who knew these particular folks. Always ask questions and, ask questions and be questionable of the people that are in your newsroom, your editors, your leaders. You should not go into a space accepting what they say as fact. Now, I'm going to let you know that can get you in trouble. When I was at the LA Times, I got in trouble a lot because I just, they were doing stuff that it just didn't make sense to me. And I had questions about why. Why are we doing it this way? Why aren't we doing it this way? And when you ask those questions, you begin to realize that folks are just doing things the way they're doing it because they've always done it, not because it's the best way to do any particular thing. And you don't have to follow in those same footsteps, right? And if you do follow in those footsteps, you become as much of an issue as everyone else. And so just question everything, question everybody, always be, turn that skeptical eye that we are sometimes encouraged to have going to J school, and turn it on the people that are around you as well, because everybody don't know what the hell they talk about. They telling you the same shit that somebody told them, and we want to push beyond that. Excuse me. Network horizontally in your newsrooms. Oftentimes we think about mentors. We think about networking upward, networking with people who can get you a job, people who can be, a direct advocate for you, people who have, decades of experience in the industry. And that's vertical networking. And I think there's a place for that. More and more, however, I encourage people to also consider networking horizontally. Figure out the people who are at the same stage of you in your career, whether they're with you in the newsroom or whether they're at another newsroom. Because I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna need somebody that you can call up to and cry because you spent 3 weeks on this story and they've just killed the story and you don't want to burn down the newsroom. And so you need somebody who you can call up and who will understand your frustrations and support you through that and also help you navigate how to move beyond it, for example, right? And so figure out those other people. And let's be real, some of the people around you want to be editors, right? They want to be the people in charge. Some people around you just want to be writers. They want to be, rank and file folks. They want to be in the community doing the work in that particular way. I'll say that I feel, that the job I got from when I left the LA Times, Out Magazine's director of culture and entertainment, I got because I was following the editor-in-chief, or the person who was brought in as the editor-in-chief of that publication. We were following each other on Twitter, and we would communicate and go in and out each way and like follow each other's careers in their particular. And he's younger than me. He's like, I think 1 or 2 years younger than me. And now as a freelancer, so many of the opportunities that I get to write things, to host things and moderate things is because of somebody who's kind of in my same age range or experience range, who are able to say and advocate for me and say, actually, Tre'vell will be really good for this. And so don't squander the opportunity to build connections with people who are, horizontal to you. Those are really important as well. And then this slide, HR, we don't talk about HR enough. And if you happen to be somebody who comes from a marginalized background or an other community, going into some of these newsrooms, you're going to deal with microaggressions, you're going to deal with macroaggressions, you're going to deal with plain old stupidity and ignorance. And you'll see here I say HR doesn't work for you. That's because HR works for the company. HR is interested in making sure that your organization doesn't find themselves, in a bad place, right? They're not there necessarily to advocate for you and on your behalf. That being said, there's some shit that can go down in a newsroom. And you also don't want to be afraid of HR, right? Because it might, whatever the circumstances might be, might bubble itself up to that particular point, right? So just, I think the bit of advice is to be knowledgeable about what HR can do for you, but also don't, put all of your what do you call them, eggs in that HR basket, because they ultimately are there in service of themselves. That again is where that horizontal networking, that horizontal community comes in. Christy said, who do you want to be your besties? Yes, that's where they come in, because they can assist you in figuring out, I call it an exit plan. If you're working in a newsroom and like you're done with the microaggressions and the macroaggressions, and you want to figure out what your next steps are. Maybe it doesn't include going to HR because that they're not going to do shit. And maybe it's just figuring out where your next job is going to be, right? And how you can chart that path out toward what's next. So just be, HR is there, but don't get too chummy with HR. Social media. My points about social media are actually very straightforward. Oftentimes as journalists, they want us to be boring robots on social media. They don't want you to wade into particular waters. They don't want you to have too many opinions. I'm going to get to your question, Leo, in 1 second. They don't want you to have too many opinions. They don't want you, if you're an entertainment reporter, they want you to be wary about commenting on politics. Particularly if you're a political reporter, they want you to be wary about, saying certain things that could convey, a lack of quote unquote objectivity. We spoke about that earlier. When in reality, I think the industry is going to a place in which audiences, consumers are interested in knowing that their journalists are people, that we have lives, that we have ideas and concepts and attitudes and dogs and pets and we like to bake and all of these other things. Now, that being said, you have to make the decision of what type of journalist you're going to be. You will see, like if you follow me on Twitter, my Twitter is a lot more loose, a lot more energetic than, say, Yamiche Alcindor, who's a White House reporter for PBS NewsHour right now. You know, she's not out here necessarily, you know, calling Donald Trump a racist, for example, right? And the industry, and based on where you work and the type of reporter you want to be, will dictate what types of things you can say on social media and in life versus what types of things you can't. I'm an entertainment reporter, I'm a cultural critic, I'm a film reporter. There's a lot of things that I have a lot more leeway to say on social media and a lot more personality that I'm able to bring to my social media that some others historically are not able to do. But I think it's all about figuring out, I would say first, if you can root it in some sort of fact, so you can attach an article to your statement, those types of things help build in kind of security for you, right? And so if I were to tweet out, well, not me, but because I don't fucking care and I work for myself right now. But if a journalist were to tweet out that Donald Trump is a racist, right? There are ways to show that, right? Whether it is attaching an article that debates, you know, the racial implications of a variety of his policies, right? There is you can attach a YouTube video to it or some other discussion. That's a number of the ways that like people try to get around it. I will say all of that's going to be dependent on where you work. Always read the social media policy for the company that you're, you know, applying to and looking at, because you might be surprised with some bullshit that's in that policy that you say yes to. Like you've already signed the contract, and then 10 months down the line, you say something and they tell you that it's in violation of the policy, and you're like, oh, we had a policy, right? So those are just things that you want to keep in mind. I'm going to get to these two questions that we have here really quickly. Leo asked, how do you deal with the emotional exhaustion that comes with dealing with all the micro and macro aggressions? Well, first and foremost, I have a therapist, and you should get one. Because, you know, when I was in the newsroom, and I'll say it, at the LA Times in particular, I had to deal with racist microaggressions. I had to deal with transphobic microaggressions. I had to deal with, you know, microaggressions as it relates to my age, and people feeling like because I was young, I did not know what I was talking about and could not do a particular task. Or because I was young, they didn't want to listen to me, even though I was like spearheading and leading a particular project. And, you know, having a therapist to help you work through some of those issues and process those things helps. Additionally, you know, to be quite honest, at the LA Times, a group of my colleagues, you know, had this room that we called the cry room. Okay, and it was a room on the second floor of the old LA Times building downtown that, you know, I think everybody knew existed, but we just didn't really use it for much. And when something went down in the newsroom that was, you know, just heavy for any of us, you know, we would shoot out a text to the group message. I need somebody to meet me in the room because, you know, such and such is about to make me lose my job or something like that. I think you really have to come up with the interventions that work best for you and get you to a place to where you can do the work that you need to do. Because ultimately, right, They want you to run, they want you to hide, they want you to leave ultimately. And so what can you do to fortify yourself to continue moving through those particular spaces? And then I will say to end your question, Leo, if you are comfortable, I think you should call out the behavior that you're experiencing and that you're witnessing. And if you're not comfortable, find those white people in your newsroom who posted, black boxes on their Instagrams in June and July, and tell them what you're experiencing and have them advocate on your behalf, right? Because by advocating, I mean, it could be as simple as, one of the questions I love asking is, what do you mean by that? When somebody says something, I don't understand. What do you mean by that? And you turn it back on them for them to do their own kind of mental calculation to explain their way out of a hole. Or if you have a personality like mine, then you'll be like, that's a microaggression, or the comment that you just said is rooted in white supremacy. A lot of these things, while sometimes deemed as inflammatory, ultimately prevents us as people of color, as Black folks, as LGBTQ folks, as women from feeling and being safe in particular environments. And newsrooms are notoriously places where like a lot of these ways of interacting are collapsed because you spend so much time with these people. And so they feel like they can say a racist joke in front of you because you're not that type of Black, whatever the fuck that means. And so, yeah, I hope that I've given you a range of ways to deal with it and grapple with it. Last thing I'll say is you can always say no. Oftentimes, as folks from certain backgrounds, we become the like de facto Black reporter or race reporter or gender reporter or Asian American reporter just because of who we are. And you should feel empowered to say no when you don't want to do those stories. When I was at the LA Times, initially it was around all of the Black Lives Matter protests in the aftermath of one of the Black, boys and men that have been killed. I can't remember. I think it was Mike Brown. And I was covering protests downtown, and it just became a lot as a Black person to have to do that work, that physical work, but also that emotional labor. And that's when I got comfortable being able to say, no, I'm not interested in covering the protest today. Can Susie go do it? And so I hope that answers your question. And then Monica asked, would you like / retweet things from other journalists? A lot of people say retweets don't equal endorsements. So retweets don't equal endorsements has become that thing that like everybody puts into their inbox, into their bios rather, as a means of building some sort of distance between them and the work that is at hand, right? And I think that depending on the type of location that you're working for, even if you're just like working for yourself and freelancing, like you can do that. But I challenge the idea that retweets don't equal endorsements, because I also wonder about like, why are you retweeting it if it's not resonating with you in a particular way? And it's different now because you can quote tweet things, right? So even if you're quote tweeting or retweeting something that like maybe you're retweeting Dead Man, who, praise the Lord, will not be in the White House in a few months, and he's spreading misinformation or disinformation, you can retweet it and say he's a lying asshole or whatever the case may be, right? And I think now the tech is a little different, that like provides you ways to move beyond that. But I will say retweets does not equal endorsement. It's not a fail safe if you come into an issue with your employer. Because many of them feel like they own you anyway, and they feel like they own your social media platforms and all those other stuff. That's why you see a lot of broadcast reporters in particular will change their social media handles based on the broadcast station that they're working for, right? Because based on that social media policy, the network or the station owns their social media page, right? And so that's why you see that a lot. You see that a lot more with broadcast reporters than you do see with print or digital reporters. But yes, the idea of like retweeting, liking things from other journalists is a great way to share ideas that you might have that you don't feel comfortable for whatever reason sharing or saying out loud. Sharing an article that says, "Oh, this is an interesting perspective." I will say I do think that we're getting to a period in the industry in which, at least I hope we're getting to a period in the industry in which, like, if what you say is rooted in your experience or rooted in some sort of like, fact-based or research or science, that like you should be able to say it. But again, that's a case-by-case basis, depending on what newsroom you are in. I think, I'll do this last slide here, and then will unshare my screen and get to more of your questions. One thing that I say to everybody, particularly young folks, is be a bad bitch, but be open to critique. And what I mean by that is oftentimes as young people, as LGBTQ people, as women, as Black folks, et cetera, going into these spaces, as folks from lower socioeconomic statuses, as folks who maybe you went to a community college and you didn't go to a 4-year university. We sometimes go into these spaces feeling as if we weasel our way in, as if we came in through a back window instead of the front door. And a lot of times it's broader society, right, that makes us feel that particular way. And then we go into these newsrooms and we continue to get beat down just because we're so used to being beat down, right? But when you go into these spaces, be a bad bitch. Walk into there knowing that you give something to that space that you deserve and you worked your ass off to get into that space, and that there's stuff that you can do that none of those other motherfuckers in there can do. Okay? Because guess what? A lot of those motherfuckers who's currently in there, they don't know about no TikTok, they don't know about no Snapchat, they don't know about, there's a new app, Clubhouse. They don't know about like all of these things that like many of you have grown up with, right? That is a skill set, right? And to be able to use those particular platforms for reporting purposes, for verify. When I was at the LA Times, one of the school shootings happened, and the young folks in the newsroom were able to get interviews from folks who were at the school because we knew how to fucking use Facebook. Like it seems like that like are kind of very much connected to what you all are as young people, and how you already move through the world and communicate through the world. Figuring out how to use those tools for reporting purposes automatically makes you different and unique in a particular space. But be open to critique, meaning that there's always something that all of us can learn, right? There's always growth that can happen for all of us. And it can come from the most unlikely person sometimes, that lesson that you need to like, glow up your particular practice. So be a bad bitch, but be open to critique. Those are my social pages. If y'all want to follow, DM me any particular questions going forward. My website is just my name, Tre'vellAnderson.com. And there's like a contact page there if you have questions. I will respond. It will take me some time, but I will respond if you would like, you know, whatever types of advice, suggestions, etc. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat. I'm gonna go through them now for the last few minutes. Myron asks, bouncing off the social media thing, would you recommend creating personal accounts and have it separate from your? That's some bullshit, because I shouldn't have said that's some bullshit, but I said it now, and it's being recorded for real this time. The idea of having separate accounts, like, you know, a private account that, you know, your friends follow that like lets you do whatever you want to do, and then a professional account that's like public facing and open, is something that like folks came up with, I'd say maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. I'm old, my memory goes all over the place. But as a means to allow you to kind of have your own personal identity over here and your professional identity over here. The problem though is, with your attention separated between these different accounts, you never really have the opportunity to build a brand for yourself, right? Because you're over here squandering, you know, your real feelings about, you know, the Real Housewives of Atlanta, and then over here, you're giving us your NPR voice or your broadcast voice and only sharing articles. And what you'll find is that you're never on either platform or either account, you're never able to create your own brand and your own identity. And the reason why having a brand and an identity as a reporter is important is because that is how you, in 2020, in a lot of ways, make sure that you will forever be employed, right? I was laid off from Out Magazine on Christmas 2019, almost a year ago. I announced it. I knew it was coming on the 25th. I announced it, I believe, on the 22nd or the 23rd. And when I announced it, because I had a following, because I had a brand and people knew my work, I immediately had freelance opportunities in my inbox. Well, maybe not immediately, but like within a week, I had a host of opportunities. And it was because people knew what I could bring to their particular platforms as a freelancer, and it was because I had a brand already established. But if I just had a professional account where like all I did was, you know, share articles that I wrote or articles that somebody else wrote, and didn't really spend the time and the energy interacting with folks through that, then you end up just having 2 accounts with, like, you know, maybe you got 1,000 people on one account and like 500 on the other, right? But the beauty of social media, as you all know, is that kind of back and forth and that conversation piece, and being able to be part of whatever conversations are happening in the zeitgeist. That's how you build a brand. That's how you build an identity outside of the publication that you work for, right? But if your professional identity is so wrapped up in the publication that you work for, if and when you get laid off, because layoffs are a very real part of this fucking trash industry, then what do you do then? When you're no longer that LA Times reporter, or you're no longer that NBC4 anchor, right? It's important for you all to just continue thinking longer term about what you all are doing. That said, if you, you know, some people have, oh, see, I told you I talk too much. It's already 1:50. I'm going to get your other questions in here, I swear. So I won't even say what I was about to say, because this will be a joke about, you know, Finstas and fake Twitters, and, you know, people got free Twitters and stuff these days. Okay, but see, I don't went too far. Anyway, yeah, okay. There's a lot here. Okay, Danny, what was the transition like working at a college newsroom to a newsroom ran by a bunch of older people with different / boomer biases? It was very different, you know. It was going into a space, and when I was at the LA Times, frankly, you know, these people who were like titans of the industry and had been doing this for a while, looking at me like I was trying to steal their job, right? And so there was already some tension there. And additionally, you know, they felt as if I wasn't, because I had just come out of school, that I wasn't able to, you know, do the type of work that they thought was necessary. The gag was, however, I was breaking, you know, major stories in my local community, in my school newspaper, the same type of reporting that they were doing at the LA Times, right? And so I think, again, it's about, you have to be confident in yourself and your ability, so that when you go into these spaces and you deal with all of these different potential issues, you know why you're in that space and you know what you can bring to the table. And when you get the opportunity to show what you can do, you have to perform. Performing is the sure way to ensure that all of this other bullshit that sometimes happens in these newsrooms kind of, you know, fall away, because when they know you can do the work, they're not going to be worried about your age. Monica, given the current industry, what are other options to break in other than traditional internship to newsroom jobs? Freelancing, starting something of your own, like your own blog or a podcast or a YouTube channel, whatever the case may be. More and more, a lot of the folks that you might follow, that you might look to in terms of their writing, they're actually not reporters. They're actually not journalists. They're just people who have an opinion. And because they have an opinion and have built a brand for themselves, they're given an opportunity to do a host of things. That being said, you can't beat that traditional path, right? Doing an internship and then breaking into a new, you can't beat that, because, you know, coming out of grad school and starting and having my first job be at the Los Angeles Times immediately gave me a cachet that other folks who were just getting out of school had to work up to get, right? And so you can't beat it. That said, you can have a fruitful life and a fruitful career by doing your own thing while you're in school, showing that you can report, building your own particular clips, podcasts, you know, audio storytelling, etc., and using that instead of the clips that you would get from a traditional internship as a means to get you to that newsroom job, if that's what you want, or to freelance and continue freelancing on your own. Hope that answers your question, Monica. Anissa, what are the steps to freelance journalism, like reaching out to outlets and giving them an article or something? So you pitch, and by pitching, it is a 2 to 3 short graph message that you email to an assignment editor at a particular publication. And in that pitch, you tell them, this is what the story is. This is why you should have me write it. And when you project that you would be able to finish it. You want to keep it very short, very quick, and straight to the point. Basically your nut graph, right? Because editors get an ass load of shit every day, and you want to make sure that, like, they can read it really quickly, figure out your worth in connection to a particular story, and then greenlight it. And then from there, before you write a single word, you need to negotiate your rate. Okay, that was in the slide. For those who are watching the recording, you missed it because I didn't hit record until halfway through. But always negotiate your rate, and then you can negotiate contract stipulation in terms of who owns the copyright. Does the publication own the copyright for the first year, and then it comes back to you so that you can use it for, in a book, for example, if you want to write a book about a particular topic. Those are things that you can, go with. It's a fairly simple process. Anissa, email me, and I can give you more details about, like, what that looks like. Anybody can email me. Yesterday during a keynote, the speaker said you're either an activist or a journalist. Do you think you can be both? I don't know who the person was. I'm going to play something else. But I think that journalism, as a Black, queer, non-binary person of trans experience, my journalism is advocacy. My journalism is activism, right? My journalism is in the line of Ida B. Wells and Thomas T. Fortune, folks whose work had a purpose in it. And so I resent that idea, Amber, that like you quote unquote can't be both. I want to fight whoever said that. As far as making your own brand or branding, what are some good online sites, portfolios would you suggest? Do not do WordPress, Jesus. We are beyond that. Squarespace is what I would suggest because you don't have to worry about all of those updates and all that foolishness. Squarespace is really good. Squarespace is what my site is on. And you know, the portfolio part of my site is not up to date, so don't go, you know, trying to rag on me. But Squarespace is what I would suggest. Medium is a good tool as well, and you could potentially get your work picked up by a host of those Medium publications that are there. But I would suggest Squarespace, your own domain, your own thing that you own, that you can control, because it's yours. Definitely a conflict of my own identity. The last workshop I went to before this one, they kept emphasizing cleaning your social medias and having a personal Facebook, etc. It can be hard, especially with all these social issues going on. And I don't know if I'm willing to give up my voice to be employed. That's it. If you're not willing to give up your voice, then you need to figure out what other ways you can move through in this industry. Okay, y'all, I gotta go because I think somebody else is in this room, and you know I want to give them time to do whatever setting up they need to do. But please email me, DM me, tweet me, etc. Whatever your questions are. Thank y'all so much. Oh, it's so many questions that I missed. Oh, Jesus, 10 messages, 12 messages. Oh, thank y'all. Y'all saying thank you now. Okay. Whew. All right. Oh, Steve, it was Steve Padilla who told you that you couldn't be an activist? Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Okay. Because it's still recording, I will say this on the rack. I love Steve. Steve's a great writer. Steve was at the LA Times when I was at the LA Times. I disagree with what the hell he said. Love him to death, though. So shout out to Steve. But I vehemently disagree. Vehemently. Okay. Thank y'all. Y'all be blessed. Like I said, reach out to me at Tre'vell Anderson on Twitter, at Rayzhon, RAYZHON on Instagram. You can email me, anderson.tre'vell@gmail. I will answer your questions, I promise, or you can hit me up through my website. I hope that you all have enjoyed this and you got plenty out of this. I'm sorry for the people who are now watching the recording. You like, that's it? Because I forgot to hit the record button, you know, at the beginning, because I told y'all I have a 75-year-old mind in here. Anyway, thank y'all. Y'all have a good one. I'm outie. Now I got to figure out how to close this. Oh, I hit end. Bye.